In consistence with our mandate, today we're discussing bilateral relations between China and Zimbabwe. There has been an upsurge of Chinese private investors in Zimbabwe, and this is seen as a vital force in promoting the Zimbabwean economy. Today we are joined by Mr. Donald Rushambwa, who is the General Manager of the China-Zimbabwe Exchange Center on the Diplomat couch. Welcome. My name is Osli Matsikenyeri. Donald, welcome to the Diplomat couch.
Thank you very much, Osli.
So tell us about the inspiration behind the formation of the China-Zimbabwe Exchange Center.
So China-Zimbabwe Exchange Center is a registered private voluntary organization, but it started off as China-Africa Economic and Culture Exchange and Research Center in 2017. So the inspiration being that we wanted to create a platform whereby China and Zimbabwe could better correlate as a people, and whereby we could serve as a bridge between the Chinese that are coming to Zimbabwe and the Zimbabweans that are going to China. So seeing that there was now a lot of trade with the Look East policy that was implemented by the then president, we then realized that the need for the people of Zimbabwe and the people of China to correlate was now more imminent. That's why we formed China-Zimbabwe Exchange Center as a platform that would serve as a bridge between Zimbabwe and China.
Okay, so you've mentioned that one of the aims is to develop international relations between China and Zimbabwe. Are there any stakeholders who are helping you to achieve this aim?
So as I said earlier on, that with the influx of the Chinese people coming to Zimbabwe and the Zimbabweans going to China, we then realized that the first key stakeholders that we need to work with to make this work are the government stakeholders. So we engaged with the government of China, and through the embassy of the People's Republic of China in Zimbabwe, we then managed to sign various MOUs to that effect. We also engaged with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs here in Zimbabwe, since it's the start-off point for international relations with any other nation. And we've been working very well with these two stakeholders. We then further went on to engage local government authorities, such as the city of Harare, whereby we engage them on various activities and projects that we want to implement on behalf of the Chinese people. We then come up with twinning arrangements, whereby we twin the local governments here in Zimbabwe and the local governments in China. To date, we have done 2 twinnings between the city of Harare with one of the provincial governments in China, that is Beijing municipality, and also the city of Victoria Falls, the town of Victoria Falls, with a city called Yanling. So there's been great cooperation between these two cities in various aspects: infrastructure development, public-private partnerships, joint ventures between private sector companies and also public sector companies here in Zimbabwe. As you can see now that Zesa Holdings is also partnering with various Chinese energy companies that are helping them in resuscitating the energy sector in Zimbabwe. We also engaged key stakeholders in the communities. Those are the people that we want to engage more because they contribute to community development. So we have engaged with trusts and private voluntary organizations and CSOs here in Zimbabwe, whereby we link these CSOs with Chinese partners that want to contribute back to the community that they are operating in. So corporate social responsibility is a big thrust for us, we pride ourselves in being a corporate social responsibility facilitator for the Chinese companies that are operating here in Zimbabwe, and we link them with the communities that they are working in. So those stakeholders, they mean a lot to us. They are very vital in our operations as China-Zimbabwe Exchange Center, and we want to engage with more communities and more stakeholders in Zimbabwe. As I said, we're still starting, but there's a lot that we as an organization can do in terms of engaging many stakeholders for the development of Zimbabwe in the economic sector and also on the social front, so that they can be people-to-people exchanges.
You mentioned that you have tried to engage Chinese companies working in Zimbabwe to give back into the communities that they're operating in. Are you intending to establish a think tank for individuals who are currently residing in Zimbabwe or China, in Zimbabwe or Africa, but are of Chinese nationality?
So for us as China-Zimbabwe Exchange Center, a think tank is very important. It was one of our inspirations when we started, because there's a lot that we can learn from China. And China, having established a global blueprint to, be a major economy in the world through its Belt and Road initiatives and other foreign policies, we feel like if we create that think tank of Zimbabwean-based Chinese individuals and Zimbabweans and Africans, we can learn a lot from those policies. Right from 1978, when China started its reform and opening up through Chairman Deng Xiaoping, we could see that China took steps, to develop its economy. Right now, China is one of the biggest economies in the world. And if we have a friend like China, China is our all-weather friend. And we believe that if we have certain Chinese that are now helping us in terms of, policy formulation, in terms of consultations, we as Zimbabweans can learn a thing or two from China's economic growth journey. And we can utilize that to our advantage, and we can utilize that as Zimbabweans. I can give an example of the issue of special economic zones, whereby we now have special economic zones in Victoria Falls, Bulawayo, Harare. That policy has already been formulated, but how to implement it, that's when we now need to have consultations, we now need to have roundtable discussions with these Chinese to understand how they manage to develop their economy through those special economic zones. And we can only do that if we create that think tank. Right now we have a research center whereby we research on thematic issues such as education sector, where that's one of our main strengths, how the education sector in Zimbabwe, can copy from what China's education sector did to develop.
So can we continue that in the second segment? So Donald has just given us a brief into what inspired the formation of the China-Zimbabwe Exchange Center and its aims and objectives. When we come back, we discuss more about the initiatives that they're doing in Zimbabwe. Donald Rushambwa from the China-Zimbabwe Exchange Center, and earlier he shared the inspiration behind the formation of this organization. So Donald, back to you. Does your organization employ inclusive initiatives in driving its aims?
Well, we pride ourselves in being a locally created organization. In as much as we are China-Zimbabwe Exchange Center, we try to be inclusive of also the various ethnicity and also even the various skills that people bring to the table. So we have employed people from China who help us in our programs, culture exchange, education, poverty alleviation initiatives. And we also include all ages. If you take a look around our offices, you'll find that we have various ages, youth being the center of our initiative drive, because the future belongs to the youth, and China did include that in its strategies to develop the economy. So we try to give an opportunity for the youths to develop their country, for the youths to see the future for their country. As I was talking about the think tank in the last segment, I mentioned that we also have a research center. Most of that is based on students who are currently studying here in Zimbabwe and those that are in China and various parts of the world. So we pride ourselves in being an organization that is inclusive and that tries to put the youth at the forefront of all its initiatives and aims. So we believe that by implementing these programs being run by the youth, we can have a longer life and a longer lifespan of our projects as China-Zimbabwe Exchange Center.
Thank you for that. How do you think Chinese investments are improving Zimbabwe's competitiveness in the global economy?
Well, China is a global technological giant, and of all the field visits that I've done to Chinese investments that are here in Zimbabwe, the Chinese bring in capital equipment that is modern and that is, competitive in the world. So that technological transfer puts Zimbabwe at a competitive edge with its regional and international competitors. And by the Chinese bringing in this modern technology, we can also learn on how best we can grow our economy by ourselves. And we can also get an advantage to, implement more projects by ourselves with the help of the Chinese, with the help of getting to understand how modern technology works. And the Chinese have taken a sign of good faith by, implementing and constructing projects that are at par with the regional and international countries. So we believe that the Chinese bring a competitive edge to Zimbabwe, and that will in turn grow our economy.
Thank you. So I'll take you back a little. You shared about education, the people-to-people exchanges between China and Zimbabwe, particularly in education and culture. What role does China-Zimbabwe Exchange Center play in facilitating that? And whilst you're answering that, what criteria do you use to select the beneficiaries of the China-Zimbabwe scholarship?
So China-Zimbabwe, as you've rightly said, China-Zimbabwe Exchange Center is three main pillars that it focuses on. That is the education, the people-to-people exchange, and also the cultural exchange element. So in the education sector, we have partnered with the city of Harare, whereby we're giving scholarships to 20 primary schools. And of those 20 primary schools, we are facilitating scholarships for over 400 students. And over 600 students are benefiting from our stationary packages that we give them on a term-by-term basis. So we believe that education is the key to success. Education is one of the pillars that we would need as Zimbabwe to grow our economy. So that's why our main thrust is on the education sector. Even our research is centered also on how we can make the education sector here in Zimbabwe more competitive and how it can be, inclusive of everything. And then on the people-to-people exchanges, there are different working cultures that, arise when investments come through. The Chinese have their own way of doing things. We have our own way of doing things. So we are a facilitator that tries to now connect the different working cultures so that the two peoples, the people of China and the people of Zimbabwe, can work together to accomplish one goal, and that is to build Zimbabwe for the better. So we hold various workshops on various topics such as, language. We try to teach the Chinese the local language and also English being the international medium for communication. And we also try to teach the locals the Chinese language so that they can communicate. Some of this technological transfer that we're talking about, it cannot be fully implemented if these people don't understand each other. So the Chinese can bring in state-of-the-art international equipment, but then if the locals can't use them, then it doesn't benefit anything. So we try to teach the two peoples an inclusive language that they can, communicate with, and so that they can understand each other and progress. For many Chinese, English is not one of their strengths, but they try to, bring supervisors that are somehow conversant in English, and they also try to engage translators so that this can be a smooth process in investment and community development. And then on the cultural exchange element, China is a country that is rich in its culture. They take pride in their culture, and they try to implement their policies based on cultural beliefs, based on cultural norms. So we also want to know how we as Zimbabwe can have that cultural heritage aspect in us so that we can take pride in our culture. We also want to make the people of China know more of our Zimbabwean culture, because they're now staying here and they also need to know our culture as a people. We also need to know their culture as a people when we go to travel, when we go to do business with them. We need to know how things work. We need to know their food culture. I'm a big lover of Chinese food. You guys should try it. And we need to know how best we can correlate as a people in terms of that cultural exchange element. We have a program called Dreamstar, which was launched in 2014, whereby we go around Zimbabwe to scout for talent, local talent, which we then give platforms to showcase that talent to the international community. Our biggest sponsor has been China, and we've had 7 tours to China of people from different communities here in Zimbabwe, showcasing different talents, music, dance, traditional, contemporary art, you name it. So we then give them platform for the people of China to also know how the Zimbabweans have, over the years, managed to, preserve their culture, preserve their heritage, and, push culture as an element that brings about economic growth.
Thank you very much for joining us, Donald. When we come back, we're going to discuss the China-Zimbabwe Exchange Center goals for 2023 and how they are aligning their objectives with the SDGs. We are back with Mr. Donald Rushambwa, who is the General Manager of the China-Zimbabwe Exchange Center, and he was just sharing about the scholarship program that they have. So what criteria do you use for this scholarship?
So for a scholarship program, as I mentioned, it's in 20 primary schools here in Harare and also 4 state universities in Zimbabwe: MSU, UZ, Lupane State University, and NAST. So the criteria we use is, first of all, we look at the academic achievements to date. We want students who maintain a grade 2.1 average. And we also try to look at the background. They then have to be students who are really in need of the scholarship. And we also then look into what they've been doing to the school or the communities that they're living in, for them to achieve that scholarship. And also we try by all means to leave the selection process to the schools. So we are only going to facilitate for the financing of the scholarships, but then the schools are the ones who select the students that are going to be on the scholarships.
Thank you for sharing that. The United Nations formulated the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development Goals, which are a global blueprint for dignity, peace, and prosperity for people. How is the Zimbabwe-China Exchange Center aligning its mandate with these SDGs?
So in all our programs, we have identified that we are linking with 3 main SDGs. That is SDGs number 1, that speaks to no poverty. As we all know, China has managed to alleviate poverty in China, and they are working towards doing the same for the rest of the world. So by getting financing options from Chinese corporates that are working in Zimbabwe and those from China, we've managed to implement certain programs in the communities that we work with, that is Mavuku, Mbare, Epworth, Budiriro, just to mention just a few, and also in Bulawayo. So we try to aim for a no poverty goal, and we also, in the scholarship program, aim for the quality education aspect, whereby we want kids to go to school. We want them to get stationery to use when they're at school, uniforms to use when they're going to school, so that they can have quality education. They don't have to think about the hardships of life when they're going to school. We also aim to engage goal number 8, whereby we try to provide decent work and economic growth. Because of the investments that are coming here in Zimbabwe, we can see that the economy is growing bit by bit due to these Chinese investors. Chinese investors are one of the biggest investors here in Zimbabwe, and that will then lead to economic growth, decent work. The Chinese corporates have employed a lot of people in the areas that they are working with. They're aiming for employing local labor in those respects. We also, our final goal, the 4th goal, will be SDG number 17, which speaks to strategic partnerships. I remember in our first segment, we talked about the stakeholders that we work with in all areas, the government stakeholders, local stakeholders, private players. So strategic partnerships for us is one of our biggest strengths, and we want that to be the key driver for economic growth here in Zimbabwe.
And quickly before you go, what are your resolutions for 2023 in terms of your organization? So
in terms of our organization, we really want to get deep into all the communities in Zimbabwe, where all the Chinese are working in, so that we can get the Chinese to have a good public perception. Right now, the public perception for Chinese corporates is not, I think you can agree, is not that good. But we want people to know the real truth. We want people to know that the Chinese are here for the betterment of our country, for the betterment of our communities. And we want that to be done in action. So we will be going to all the communities that the Chinese are working in, so that we can see real economic growth that is being brought by the Chinese investors.
Thank you very much, Donald, for joining us on the Diplomat Couch. Shortly, we shall be joined by Carlos Rakavapano, who is a beneficiary of the China-Zimbabwe Scholarship. We are back with Carlos Rakavapano, a beneficiary of the China-Zimbabwe Scholarship. Carlos, welcome to Diplomat Couch.
Thank you.
Can you please share with us a brief journey or background to you receiving the China-Zimbabwe Scholarship and how it felt for you?
All right, so it was in 2020, after the COVID period. So, things were difficult for everyone in the country. So I decided to apply for a scholarship, and I was fortunate enough to be granted a scholarship by China-Zimbabwe Exchange Center. After talking to Mr. Donald, I knew it was a good thing and the future was great, because after I finished my degree, they managed to employ me here at the company, and I'm now working here and everything is okay.
At what level were you when you applied for the scholarship?
Okay, I was in my final semester. It was level 4.1.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what did the scholarship provide for you? How has it changed your life?
It was a great opportunity for me. It helped me to increase my critical thinking, to base judgments on reasoning, and it also helped me to look around and see what's around me, to make sure I'm able to support others around me, to see life in such a way that life is not only about me, and it's also about other people, to consider other people's feelings.
And what was your motivation behind? You mentioned that it was 2020. Things were very hard for a lot of people, but what motivated you to seek the China-Zimbabwe scholarship of all maybe the available scholarships that are here in Zimbabwe?
So after I heard there was an opening for scholarship, I researched about the organization, and I managed to see various activities they are doing for the country. So, and also they said we have got an opportunity to go to China after the scholarship, after the degree for masters.
Thank you very much, Mr. Carlos Shakawapano, for joining us. And we'd also like to thank Mr. Donald Ushambwa, who is the General Manager of the China-Zimbabwe Exchange Center, for coming on the diplomatic couch and sharing about the aims and mandates of their organization and the contributions towards the education and cultural business sectors of Zimbabwe. My name is Osli Matsikinyeri. Thank you for joining us.